Maurice, thank you so much for joining DigiDame today. The reason why I was so anxious to interview you is because a lot of people in the United States that have young children feel that they're spending too much time on their digital equipment and they're not really getting social skills. And you came and told me all about this whole new education system you have that's totally digital oriented. So I wanted you to tell the DigiDame readers what you're thinking and why you're thinking it and why you really think it's the future of education.
I'm living in the Netherlands. I have 4 older children who did the whole school system already. I'm doing opinion polls in the Netherlands, and already in the 60s I learned how to program a computer. So I was always very busy with the digital developments. And what I already noticed in the 80s, and that while at home more and more we saw the digital instruments coming in and children starting to use them, school didn't use them at all in the 80s and the 90s. And currently I see a completely new development. I have a 3-year-old. She was already busy with the iPhone and later with the iPad when she was half a year old. And for her, the iPad is day to day. She works on it. She plays on it. She has educational apps. When she goes to school next year, school has to prepare her for the year 2025 or 2030. If you see how fast everything develops, if you see the last, let's say, 17 years since the starting of the internet, the next 10 years will be faster developments than the last 17 years. So school has to prepare my daughter and other children for the future and not for the past. If you see what's happening on the schools, schools are still preparing children for the 90s or the 95 in a completely analog world. And the world is more and more a digital world. It's not that there are some basic competences you don't have, you need to have in the analog world, but most part of your competencies in the future, capacities, are in the digital world. I met a student who told me that his definition of an exam is, for 3 hours I have to forget that Google exists. And you can say, okay, you need to know everything by head, in your head, because maybe the electricity falls out and you cannot be online. But I think it's more important to know how you can work with the online possibilities instead of doing like online world doesn't exist. And it's crazy that in school you mainly see an analog world and outside school you see mainly a digital world. So the school we develop, it's completely based on the fact that each of the pupils work with an iPad. So they have basically the possibility to work with school 24 hours a day.
So what are you suggesting? How are you suggesting children don't go to school? How do they get their education?
No, school is also a 24-hour, learning is a 24-hour activity. School, in the old version, is only between 9 and 4 or 5 you learn, and outside you don't learn. If you go to school, it's better to do those things you cannot do digital. So the socializing is very important, but a frontal way of teaching is not the way it should be done. It's like one size fits all. And the good thing in school is that we can develop the talents individually of people, and with the help of technology you can do that because a teacher has 20, 25, 30 pupils in the group or class. So she cannot handle the fact that each of the pupils is an individual person with their own talents and with their own possibilities. By using technology in the right way, you can develop the individual possibilities and capacities of a child much better, while when you are together in a physical building, in a physical surrounding, you can use that opportunity to do those things you cannot do in the virtual world.
So how do you think schools should be structured going forward now that we're all very digitally inclined?
School should be a perfect combination of a virtual and a physical world. So while the school we had from the past was a school in an industrial world, completely organized by teaching children between 4 or 5 years old and 18 years old everything they had to know in the rest of their life. But we are now in a world where you can learn continuously, can reach all the information possible, all times, everywhere, from everywhere. So school has to be that combination, and by using the technology and using it in the right way, and also understanding how you can use the information of the digital world in all kinds of projects, that's the perfect combination, because that's the world they also meet outside their houses, and most important, the world they will meet in the future.
So, do you think the classroom will continue to exist?
Yes, partly the classroom, the school building will exist, but we don't use the classroom anymore for a kind of frontal teaching that the teacher says, okay, today we have the lesson about this and this, and I will explain you this and this and this. When you are together physically with each other in the school, then you have to do the things together, and not only listening to someone who introduce you in a kind of topic, while most probably on the internet or in YouTube or somewhere else, or in Khan Academy, they can teach you much better about this topic than most of the teachers are able to do.
How do you think the individual student will react to this if they are pacing themselves and moving along on their own level?
I think they like that much more, because if you talk to people now between, let's say, 10 and 20 about school, usually they say it's dull. They are living in a world with a lot of influences, a lot of media coming to them, and in school it doesn't happen. So I hear a lot of people saying, yeah, the youngsters from today, they cannot concentrate a long time for a specific topic or activity. And I say, did you see them gaming? Or did you see my daughter with an iPad? She can be there 1 or 2 hours on. So what is the situation? Young people cannot do a long time the same things as old people can do. And we don't have to try to form young people like we are, because the world is not like it was when we were young.
So what are you trying to do in Amsterdam with all this information? What are you trying to set up?
We are in the process to start elementary school, completely based on those ideas. We start the school most probably in August of 2013. And
2030?
13.
13.
2013. And children like my daughter and other children of people who also know what happened at home with those children and iPads, they are very enthusiastic about it, and we are now in the process with the Dutch government to try to find opportunities to form several of those schools.
So you would prefer your daughter Daphne, who's 3 years old now, to be educated at home with an iPad?
No, I don't prefer her only to be at home with an iPad, but I rather, if I have to make a choice, I rather educate her at home with an iPad than without any technology inside the school, because then she will be prepared for the past and not for the future.
So then what will the school curriculum or the school day look like in 2013 for a child that's in the 2nd or 3rd grade? When do they go to the bricks and mortar school, and when do they do their at-home iPad work?
They can enter the school building between 8 o'clock and about 10:30 on an individual base, and then they can work individually or in small groups. Between 10:30 and about 2 o'clock, they work in bigger groups and socialize more. But what they do then is those things you cannot do with the help of a virtual instrument. And after 2 o'clock, they are starting more individual or small group activities, and also more physical activities. So it's not only to be in a digital world, but the most important thing is, if they are at home, if they are on holiday, if they are in a hospital, or if they're out of town, they still are connected, because you don't use the iPad only to use the educational apps, but you also use, for example, FaceTime to connect with other pupils, or FaceTime to connect with your teacher. And the teacher is much more a coach who makes the conditions for children to learn, instead of mainly to teach the things they have to know.
So are there software programmers that are now coming up with these apps that children and students will use? How is this progressing?
Now, if you see currently the situation with the iPad, then there are already many apps for different age groups, from let's say 1 year on to 18, where you can do a lot of things already. You have like Khan Academy with more than 3,000 topics. So there are a lot of kinds of apps already. But what's much more important, in schools they work in projects. You define projects for 1, 2, 3 or 4 children. There's a basic question they develop together with the coach, and they go on to do a kind of research in a kind of project about this topic. And the research can be in the physical world, in Wikipedia, in Google. They can take pictures themselves. They can build something physically and then make picture of it and finalize the project. And that project is also available for all other children to learn.
Okay, thank you for being with us today, and we will probably do a part 2 with you as questions come in from DigiDame readers that probably will challenge this theory, but we appreciate you sharing it with us, and we hope a few months from now there'll be further updates.
Thank you very much.